Good morning, everybody. It is Marissa Friedman, your friendly executive cat herder, and I am coming to you again with some exciting updates around the Women's Venture Summit. I've had people reach out from Texas and from DC and New York going, what is this summit? Tell me more, tell me more. So I thought that it would make sense to bring one of the women that is kind of in charge of this event and really has architected with, obviously another group of volunteers and other people within the team, this incredible event for women. So with that, I'm going to bring in from Tejas, our friend Raven O'Neal. Hi, Raven. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm hanging in there, man. It's a little rainy in San Diego, so it just feels like fall. I'm ready for all of the pumpkin. I feel like we've all been waiting for fall or weather, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more before we jump in deeper, like top level Women's Venture Summit. Like, what is it if someone's never heard of it or if they're coming from the East Coast? Because I know a lot of people on the West Coast and in California know the organization, but give me a little bit, like 30 seconds about the Women's Venture Summit.
Well, it is an event designed to engage more female angel investors to invest in female-led startups. So we bring both sides of the cap table together to really learn about engaging investors, but also deal flow and what the investment thesis looks like and all of the above. It's really just meant to get more women to invest in female-led startups.
Well, and I think that's really interesting because I think when we talk about the statistics, right, around investment that goes to women or investment in minority women, I won't even say the numbers because they're so atrocious and I'm not going to put you on the spot. But what we know traditionally, right, is there's obviously a ton of conferences and programming out there. And I kind of want to differentiate what you guys have done because it appears to me, just based on all of the research and in talking to people who have gone, and I myself having been in the space, you've got curated a group of more than 150 investment groups that have been involved over the past 7+ years that you guys have been running this event. And what I think is really interesting is you have kind of these different tracks, right? So you have kind of a track for these investors or potential investors, right? Like Sylvie and I have talked about this. Like, I didn't know anything about investing. I just knew that a friend of mine wanted to start a business and wanted a loan. And I was like, here's a check. I didn't think about things like diligence or let me see your finance. I was just helping out a friend, right? But I think you've got that part of the equation, if I understand correctly. And then you have another part of the equation, which is for the entrepreneurs kind of learning about that investment process in kind of a safe environment, right? So tell me a little bit more about kind of the different tracks within the conference, because I think that's really important because I think a lot of conferences are marketing to one group or the other group, but not usually both at the same time. So I'd love to hear that.
Absolutely. I'm going to rewind just a little because this is the first year so this event, usually it happens every year, and it starts out with both sides of the table really learning together, and then they break off and learn about the different tracks. This is the first year we're really focused on, instead of having founder conversations and investor conversations, the state of women in business, whether it be an investor, a founder, or someone still working in corporate, overall, what that looks like. So we start out with the state of women. We're going to talk about what that looks like. Over 2 million women left the workforce in 2020. By the end of 2020, that data had come out. So we're really going to look overall at what the state of women is together and then do that break off. And that break off is meant to, on one side, educate the founder on how do I engage investors? How do I look at my cap table? How do I sign away equity? What should I be looking for? All of that, due diligence, all of the above. And then on the investor side, it's really, what should my thesis look like? Just diving into building, especially if you're interested, how do I get started and what does that look like?
And I think you've made a really clear distinction that it's a coming together of both sides, and that's how you're kicking off the conference, which I think is incredible. I mean, I've noticed and done some sneak peeks at the preview of the schedule, and I saw this Power Woman Index kind of session that was in there, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think it's a brilliant way of doing things, because what you're doing is you're creating this very intentional community that is starting in the same place together and then branching off. So the way that I look at all of this is it's kind of like branches of the same tree, right? The goal being to get more female founders funded, but also doing it in a curated and sustainable way. Because I think so much of what I see in the entrepreneurial space is about adopting a certain way of like, get your pitch and get your 2-minute pitch and get your slide deck, and you start throwing around vernacular, and you have real conversations with entrepreneurs as you're in discussions, and you realize like they're not prepared. They have no idea what an investor is going to ask for. They haven't thought about it. They actually have never thought about what type of investor they want for their company. They're just looking at getting funded. And what I've found very interesting about your programming is that there is a very defined way that you're creating safety in the space to have these conversations. And after talking to women that have gone through, not only just, things that you've done on the side with Stella Labs, but gone to the conference, they leave with just this sense of like purpose and direction. And so they've got kind of this alignment, right? Like I believe every, female founder, any founder actually, they start with kind of this passion and this purpose, right? For whatever it is they've created. And then that third piece, that profit piece, is super important. And I love to hear, people like you that are kind of in the space, that are kind of at the forefront of this. Can you tell me a little bit more about your background? Because obviously, for people that don't know you, right, they're just seeing you, okay, so she's in charge of this conference. But I kind of want to unwind that. Tell me a little bit more about you, because obviously that is not your day-to-day job, right? So,
correct. So I'm the executive director of Stella Labs. Stella Labs is one of the companies that puts on this event. We really lead the charge. We do actually work with Stella Angels and Ad Astra Ventures to put on the event, but really Stella Labs and the team that I work with really lead the charge on that. My background in regards to that at Stella Labs is really to help women launch, scale, and fund their businesses. We deal really well in how do I get started? I have no idea. I have this idea. I want to do this business and I don't know what that looks like. And then on the other side, we deal really well in I am ready to fund this business, but I don't know where to get started with investors. And I think that we continually have this conversation in our ecosystem that there are a ton of resources out there, and there are a ton of groups like ours that are here to support they get very specific. You have tech accelerators. Ours is a female focused accelerator, but you have all this stuff. But as a founder, unless you know someone that's like, oh, I know where you should go, you really don't know where the resources are. And that's the thing, is we want to give you a starting point for those resources and an access point to just come in. Everyone is welcome. Come into the network and really let's get things moving for you. And that's what our main focus is, even in the Stella Labs space and the Women's Venture Summit space.
And I think that's really important because, again, as I started talking to more and more people about, hey, there's this thing going on, there's this, they started going, well, who's putting it on? Is it this or it's that? And I'm like, no. I was like, you realize that there's more out there than maybe the things you've heard of all the time. And what I want to be really intentional with, and this is why I was asking you, is that because so many accelerators are focused, and there's a lot of founders that maybe they don't have the next tech convention, but they have, something in the food science space, or there's a place for them. And what I find fascinating is I believe your accelerator is like 12 weeks. Is that correct? It's like correct. A 12-week program. It's a 12-week program, start to finish, right? So people get to go through this flow, build out their product ideas. And I've met so many entrepreneurs that have gone through that process and said, I started with an idea. And along the way through this process, I realized, right, my market is not everyone, right? And I think that's kind of the entrepreneur's dilemma, right? The pitch is, well, the market is, 15 million people. And if I only got 1% of that market, I'd be successful, right? So what you do, in my opinion, is you're taking people on this journey in a very curated way in an era of, quite frankly, a lot of overlearning. And so that's kind of why when I look at the Venture Summit, what I see is a very directed path to like execution, to getting things done. Whether it's you're an entrepreneur and you've been working on your company and you want to get feedback from people, or if you're ready to start asking or networking with those conversations with investors, what we see so much is people are buying tons of classes online or joining communities, not participating in the communities, never opening the online class that they've purchased. And so I think there's a little bit of this kind of turnkey, and I want to say accountability in a non-punitive way, in a friendly way, in a supportive way that I think that you guys are providing that I haven't seen before in the space. So that's really cool to me. Now, kind of unwind your background a little bit for me. Like, how did you get involved? Like, when did you kind of, when did Stella Labs come on your radar?
So I actually had an idea for a startup and I didn't know where to get started. And it just so happened that a gal I knew through a running community was like, oh, I know this group that will help you get this idea onto paper and kind of go with it. So at the time I was working a corporate job and I could only do it part-time. And so I was introduced to our founder, Dr. Sylvia Ma, who I think you guys have met on some of these previous ones. And I went through the accelerator program, and my background, by the way, is in marketing. So I went through the accelerator program and then came on board to do just a couple of marketing tasks here and there, a lot of design work, and we ended up hitting it off. And I stayed on as a contract employee for like now it's 9 years. I guess that would have been like 7 years. And wow. So at one point, Dr. Sylvia Ma had stepped back as the executive director. We had a couple wonderful interim people fill the position, but no one, I guess, wanted to take the reins truly. And so in December of 2019, Sylvia asked me, how come you haven't asked to take it over? And I was just like, I didn't know that I was the right person. And so from there, I took the reins, and that's been it. And last year was my first year pretty much co-chairing Venture Summit with, we have an event director and we co-chair the event. So her and I are really the ones in the trenches coming up with the things we want to present to our planning committee to get the yay or nay.
Well, and I think that's, for those of you that are watching right now and going like, what an interesting evolution. I kind of joke, like, things don't happen to you, they happen for you, right? Because I think it's really important that because you are in the trenches, but you've been there, you've been in everyone's shoes. And I think that's really different because anybody can organize a conference, right? But not anybody can understand the nuance and needs of entrepreneurs that are trying to flesh out ideas or trying to seek investment. And so that's what I think is a really, like, for me as a core differentiator when I was trying to the analytical girl that I am, right? I'm online trying to compare conferences. And what I noticed is a lot of the conferences are not put on by entrepreneurs. They're not put on by people that have been in this space. So while they may be a beautifully done conference, they're not hitting from a programming perspective those things that are incredibly important to early stage founders or even mid-stage founders, right? And then on the investment side, what I find is, having gone to some of these investment conferences, it is a lot of tech bros. It is a lot of like, I joke I wore my vest in honor of that, right? Like, it's a lot of puffy vests and white collared shirts and loafers. And it's a lot of like, just, they don't get it. And I don't mean in a bad way. I just mean it is impossible, I think, sometimes for men to understand, why something would work, right? And I'll leave you kind of with a funny story. A few years back, we had the opportunity to sit and meet with the founder of Dry Bar. And she went through the whole story of pitching this idea of blow dry bars where women would go get their hair done, right? And men just being like, I don't get it, I get it. And fundamentally, that is an idea that, no, it isn't a revolution in science and technology, but is a revolution for women like me that need their time back, right? If it takes you an hour and a half to do your hair and you go 3 times a week, right? You've gotten about 5 hours per week, 25 hours per month of productivity back in your life. And that's just something that if you're a guy that's middle-aged and you're balding, you're not going to understand, right? And so we talked about that process of pitching over and over and over and just not having any women in the room so no one could understand the problem. And so I look at this as kind of the opposite. It is a supportive group of women from all spans of industry coming together to share resources and connect and network in a really intentional way. And I just want to tell you, Raven, thank you so much for coming on this morning and sharing with me. Really quickly, I am going to share the website for the summit so that those of you that are watching, and remind me of the dates again, Miss Raven, please.
It is a 2-day half-day event on September 17th and 18th, starting in the morning, going to middle afternoon. We give you half a day back.
You're like, we give you half a day. So really quickly, here's the website, womensventuresummit.org. You can go in here. You can see what's happening. You can sneak peek the speakers. And again, if you're watching and you're going, hey, maybe this isn't for me, but maybe this is for someone I know, share it, like, comment, of course. And also consider sending someone. So if you can't go, but you know someone that could greatly benefit, grab them a ticket. Sponsor a ticket for them, or we have a list of incredible entrepreneurs that would like to come but don't have the resources to come right now. Comment yes in the comments, and we will have a member of the team reach out to you. Thanks again, Raven. We're so glad that you came on this morning, and we will see you in just a couple of weeks at the Women's Venture Summit.